presents Adventures in Online Education.
Welcome, online educators. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education, where we discuss the realities of virtual education and bring you the best tools for the job from the experts, virtual teachers like you. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. My guest today is Maddy. She's going to show us a multitude of ways we can use Google Slides in our online classes, big and small, kindergarten through grade 12. I know you've seen them used in Teachers Pay Teachers products or highlighted on blogs and other websites. Today, my goal is to empower you to create Google Slides that you can use, that don't take forever to make, and that will leave a lasting impression on your students. So grab your computer, open your internet browser, type slides.new into the address bar, and get ready to make something amazing. Let's learn something new. All right, my guest today is Maddy. Maddy has been teaching for a little over 7 years. She attended University of Oregon for undergrad, has a master's in teaching from Oregon State, and a master's in English from Portland State University. This is Maddy's 7th year working online as well. When she isn't instructing high schoolers, she is playing video games, board games, or exploring Oregon with her partner and 4-year-old corgi, Ron. Well, welcome to the podcast, Maddy. You've always been an online teacher. This is your realm. What do you love about teaching online?
Well, teaching online actually wasn't something I didn't think I would love. It was my first job out of college, but it quickly became the only way I see myself teaching. It allows me an ability to get to know my students and their families far more than when I taught in a brick and mortar school during my grad school experience. And in building, I maybe saw parents once a year, if that, at conferences. But online, I talk to almost every parent at least once a month on the phone or in person, pre-COVID, of course, or even more frequently via email. I correspond with some parents once a week via email. Some often give me calls once a week. So I feel like I really get to know my students and their home life or other factors that are influencing their education in a way that I never got in brick and mortar. I also can really meet my students where they're at online. Like, I'm able to have students meet with me individually or in small groups. And this allows me to ensure that all of my students are successful. And the growth that I see with some of my students online is completely phenomenal.
It really is. And you are so passionate about meeting students where they are. I've had the pleasure of working with you and experiencing that firsthand. You are just such a strong advocate. And I totally agree. That ability to have small groups, one-on-ones, kind of on the fly whenever is good for you and the student. That is such an advantage. Well, one of the things we're talking about today are Google Slides and using those online, of course. So when and how do you use slides in your classroom? How do you know slides are the right tool for the job that you're trying to do?
I honestly use Google Slides in almost every class I teach. For me, they're the perfect tool to use for any lecture, or I can provide students with chances to enhance the lecture through slides. And whenever I want students to participate with each other, like practicing writing or using sentence stems, or even just general student understanding or ideas, I always use slides. The versatility of the slides allow me to use them for pretty much every lesson.
That's awesome. I love slides, use them a ton. Do you have any specific examples of that using what you just talked to, participation, writing?
Some general activities I have for students include like responding to prompts, practicing editing responses, posting discussion questions for like an on the mic or silent discussion, or even just putting like an anonymous dot on a Likert scale for how they're feeling about a topic.
I like that idea so much. It's low stakes. It gives kids sort of an easy way to engage. You could do something similar with math too, like finding a number on a number line or how much you agree or disagree with a statement for another humanities lesson. That's a really good idea. Why else do you use slides so frequently?
I find that most students don't just retain information from just hearing it. So providing visuals or text points and graphs really helps me to ensure students are understanding and retaining information. Specifically, image choices are a huge help for me. I'm a super visual learner, So I start my process by going to something like unsplash.com, where there's a lot of images that I can find and curate a group of images that relate to what I'm planning on teaching. And then I usually make some sort of template for the slide deck, and then I'll go through and add the information.
That's great. And we'll have links to sites like Unsplash in our show notes as well. It's really important to balance that, to keep your slides clean, but keep them engaging as well. Really, you have learned over the years about design, I'm sure, and how to find the right resource and really make sure that the images are having meaning while not being overwhelming to students. And we're all visual learners, so it's really important.
Yeah, I find that each of my slide decks have points for students to interact with the slides as well. So that really helps me in order to check for student understanding. So that's something that's huge, not just having a chunk of text that they have to read off of the slide, instead having them be able to see both visuals and also then participate with them.
Absolutely. The lecture style in class doesn't have to mean that students aren't participating, and I like that students are constantly participating in your class through slides. So having those frequent opportunities for engagement is really important. So let's get even more specific. You provided some examples that we've put in show notes for this episode, but it would be great to hear you speak to them. So what ways do you use slides to create lessons that are engaging and assignments that are also differentiated for your student? And then after all that, what's the most creative way you've seen slides being used in an online course?
So in general, in my live lessons, I love to use slides for real-time practice. I will create a slide deck that I just share with students that is just for them to edit, or creating just a few slides in my regular slide deck to have them participate on. This is really one of my go-to activities.
So you actually have students editing the slides then. Can you tell us more about that? That seems brave.
Well, I always start my year off with rules for using slides and telling students that they need to be respectful of what their peers and their self are really saying. So we always come up with some general participation rules as a class, and then we practice using slides first with low stakes activity, like claim a slide and answer a few questions about yourself, just to get them used to the tool. And once the class comes up with their general rules, I always make sure that we are repeating those before we are coming up with any class slide decks that we are using. They usually come up with some specific rules, like stay on topic or don't delete what other people are saying. Mm-hmm. And then if there's a more structured activity, like not just a free write on a slide, I will have them actually start by claiming their workspace. I always have a space on the slide for them to write their names, whether that be on the entire slide or just a roll on the slides. One thing I find is super helpful is Google allows you to track all of the edits are made and who made them. So
Yes.
I always let students know about this ahead of time.
Very smart. You want to deter any misuse you might experience otherwise, yes?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really great to help deter misuse, as you put it, because it allows me to track whether they are using the slides appropriately or if they're saying anything offensive or just being totally off the rails. Even if they delete it, I can see all of the past edits that have been made.
And that's great real world learning as well for accountability and knowing that whatever you put out there online, it stays there forever, right? That tweet you tweeted is there, whether you deleted it a minute after or not. It's kind of the same thing in slides. I think it's a really good way to encourage participation and build accountability and build community. I sometimes just straight off turn off the share setting or I'll toggle it on and off during a lesson. That can be helpful too in managing participants, especially at younger ages where they're just not maybe able to control themselves quite as well or don't fully understand the hands-off time and watching instead of doing for a moment. Can you use slides to engage while also getting a chance to observe the students' writing process and what they're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I actually do this in a few ways. The first is just free writing. So allowing students to kind of claim a slide and free write on the slide, just kind of get their thoughts out there. But I also allow students to respond to specific prompts or questions, such as in a silent discussion. Or sometimes they will just have a slide where they can have really low stakes participation, write whatever is on their mind, and just get that writing practice.
That sounds really good. Tell us more about a silent discussion. What does that entail?
So a silent discussion is essentially what it sounds like. It's where no one talks out loud. I actually experienced this for the first time in a brick and mortar classroom with a whiteboard and whiteboard markers, where there was a teacher-led prompt, and then students were encouraged to go up and respond to the prompt and then write a follow-up question. And then students are interacting with each other's responses, asking follow-up questions, and really talking to each other without actually talking. So students are encouraged in slides to respond to a prompt, and then with the arrow tool or just kind of in a column, they can really respond to their peers. And I usually try to break up these discussions into groups of 5 or 8 students so they have plenty of room to write their responses. I tend to just have multiple slides with the same prompt on it. And the thing about doing this in slides is students can then go read what other groups have written in order to see if they had similar ideas to other students. Occasionally, I'll even provide sentence starters to help students begin their answers, or I'll guide them in the form of a table to help them. So I'll actually put tables in the slides ahead of time and allow them to then have a more formatted discussion, like the first person's response, and then someone writes a follow-up question, and then someone else will write a response. Other times, I just instruct them to grab a text box and start writing.
That's awesome. I can see this applying, especially at high school, but also to younger grades as well. I know you're a high school teacher, but at elementary, we could definitely do similar things just with shorter expectations. So a shorter response or even single letters, say at kinder or first grade. And it's making me think in math class as well, there could be one of those prompts where the teacher gives, here's a solution to this problem. Did the mathematician do it correctly? And students note what they observe or would have done differently, or is this right? And they can still do that silently while sharing their ideas. And it really helps the more introverted students in your class have their voices be heard. So I love that idea. And then you were just mentioning text boxes and tables. Thinking about writing in real time in class, how do you differentiate that so that all students can access the lesson? For instance, graphic organizers are a great tool for all grade levels, but how do you provide that kind of scaffold in Google Slides?
So on the subject of tables, it's really easy to allow students to answer specific questions or specific tasks using tables in slides. I often have them kind of split up to have them find evidence in order to support their claims. So I will have a column in my table for the claim, and then a column for quotes, and then a column for analysis that allows them to break down their writing really clearly in the same way that I might use a graphic organizer or an outline for an essay. I also use these, as I mentioned, for silent discussions or even for mic discussions to help with student-generated questions. For mic discussions, I'll often provide slides with question categories, such as a slide for easy answer questions, a slide for text analysis questions, and a slide that connects their readings to the world. And this allows for us as a class to progress through our discussion in a way that builds on previous knowledge, so they can use those tables and really allow themselves to see what they have written on the lower thinking slides in order to really increase their knowledge of a topic.
SYS is an online management company that takes a different approach. We partner with schools to manage solutions. Whether you are a district adding an online option for students or an online school looking to go in a new direction, SYS Education can help make it exactly what you need it to be, with high-quality products at a fraction of the cost that schools pay to other companies. We are not just an educational consulting company, we are online educators ourselves, and a tech team like no other. Let us help you bring your online school experience to the next level. Find out more at syseducation.org or by emailing info@syseducation.org. Set up your free consultation meeting to discuss how SYS might be able to help your school. So we talked about tables and scaffolding and graphic organizers. Another useful scaffold in asynchronous content especially is video instruction. Can you use videos within slides for asynchronous content that students are doing maybe not in live class?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I often use my slide decks in order to help create instruction videos for assignments or asynchronous tasks that I want students to complete. So for assignment directions, I often have both a Google Doc version of the assignment instructions as well as a video accompanied by Google Slides. So this basically allows me to provide instructions in multiple formats so students can really understand what they're being asked to do.
So you've mentioned slides for discussion, for a way to allow students to share their thinking, to engage in real-time practice, and for you to see their work on a targeted skill like finding evidence for a claim. Thank you so much for all of that information. That gives our teachers and listeners so many ideas to jump off of. What's the most creative thing you've seen teachers or students do with slides?
So by far, the most creative thing I've ever seen a teacher do with slides was in our Algebra 1 class at FCA. The teacher made a choose your own adventure final exam that told a story using math and Google Slides. It basically had buttons that linked students to other slides that traveled throughout the stories based on the answers they got to their math problems. Before she gave the test to the students, she had me take it to make sure it worked, and it absolutely blew me away. Her students also had so much fun with it. It took their math word problems to the next level.
That sounds so fun and so engaging. I remember making choose your own adventure books in elementary school, but to apply that to a high school math course is just so fun and unintimidating in many ways.
They absolutely loved it. It was so fun hearing our freshmen really engage and connect to the story, and also have a freshman say that their favorite class is math is something we almost never hear of.
Oh, yes, especially once they just are starting in high school, and Algebra 1 can be such a big leap. So to make it into a story and to make it into a game, brilliant. That is a really great move. I've seen slides used elementary as well. I've seen teachers make memory games, or even simpler, just having kids fill in keywords and sentences that have an image cue too. I think the best thing I've seen for reference is having math notebooks in slides. There's just so many ways to use them and differentiate instruction and scaffold our lessons. Really, it's your creativity is your limiting factor, I think. And obviously your creativity is not limited at all. How do you teach students and parents to effectively and creatively use Google Slides to show their learning? It's one thing for us to do it as educators, but how do you help parents and students do that?
So I'm a big fan of project menus in my class that allow students to choose how they are sharing their learning. And among those is usually some form of Google slide presentation. So when I assign a slide presentation, I always provide students with clear instructions in the form of a checklist on what they need to include in their presentation. But I also provide them with both an outline of a presentation that I've created, and as well as that, I provide them with a sample presentation for what an A+ on the assignment looks like. So this allows them to see a model of the assignment and provides them a scaffold if they need it.
Why is it so important to have that model available? How do you keep kids from just copying that?
So providing a model is really helpful to ensure that students know what is expected of them. It prevents you from getting those little questions of like, why did I get this grade? What was I supposed to do? And it also gives them a goal to work toward. And to prevent them from just copying my model, I usually pick a model that isn't necessarily related to our reading or even the class. I always use Harry Potter as my example for each assignment, so it's pretty obvious if they copy my example. I have at least 5 slide decks on various Harry Potter analysis assignments.
Fantastic. I love that. So you know if you got a Harry Potter analysis for a Wuthering Heights assignment, it's pretty clear what happened.
It's pretty clear if they're copying my Harry Potter analysis. I like to make sure that students know they can be creative with this assignment also, as long as they're including the necessary information. They don't really need to follow my outline if they have an idea for how to go above and beyond.
And that's really important. At elementary, we use choice boards created in slides for literacy activities and even math activities. So allowing students to have that element of choice in their practice, that's a really solid engagement tool. And the idea of varying assessments and allowing students to demonstrate learning through slides or not even is really honoring students for who they are. So I love that you provide them the outline, you provide them the model, and then also say, or do what you wish, show me your learning another way. That's awesome.
Yeah, I really value the students' ability to pick how they are presenting their information, which is why I also don't require all students to actually present the information that they have in their Google Slides to the class for every assignment we do. But I always allow them to share if that's something that they really, really want to do. In the past, we've had gallery walks with student presentations where students can take notes on the presentations that their peers have made in order to form a study guide for a topic, whether it be like on poets of a certain era or on creation myth stories or what have you.
That is really fun sounding. There are so many uses for slides, and you've walked us through a ton of examples today of what we can be doing, starting immediately to engage students and to help families be able to get through some online assignments using slides. I really appreciate all of your ideas and all that you've shared with us as well. So in show notes, we have examples of Maddy's work for you to steal and use as you wish. Thank you for that. And thanks so much for talking to me today. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks go out to our guest today, Maddy Dahl, who shared a multitude of ideas for how we can use Google Slides in both our live and asynchronous teaching. If you liked what you heard, please hit the subscribe button. Next week, we will learn about Universal Design for Learning with special guest Tim Baddick. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our team at SYS Education, including our producer, Bo Neal, and our amazing sound engineers, Natalie Farrell and Matt Duran. Want more? Check us out at syseducation.org/AOE and find us on social media. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening.